What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian.
We're joined back with Twink Rev exclusive River Page.
Exclusive model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, faggots. How's it going?
How you doing, River? We haven't seen you around these parts in a little while.
Well, I mean, we've seen each other, just not on the podcast. Mila got on a second time before me, so I was a little salty. Guess I'm just not Lebanese enough for you guys.
No, we operate. We like to center, Middle Eastern women's voices.
Yes, I understand. the girls are fighting.
So we are recording this on Zoom. Are you jacking off as is required in your Twink Rev corporate handbook?
I am. I'm not sure if I'll quite be able to get there until sort of the middle when we start talking about trans boys or whatever. But I'll try to just keep edging as long as I can.
Well, I'm just gonna do it during our part on Islamic executions.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I've naturally already arrived. I like to get these things done early in the piece. So I guess for our listeners, if you didn't catch the story about old New Yorker writer Jeff Toobin was tubing it during a work Zoom call, and I guess didn't know the camera was on, or did know the camera was on, depending on who you listen to.
I have his quote.
And he's now fired or suspended or something.
Yeah, he stated, I made an embarrassingly stupid mistake believing I was off camera. I apologize to my wife, family, friends, and coworkers. I believed I was not visible on Zoom. I thought no one on the Zoom call could see me. I thought I had muted the Zoom video, which makes him think like he was fully aware he's on a Zoom camera, but he's like didn't think they could see him touching his dick.
He was also in some like really boring fucking training session or something, I think.
Well, he's just trying to stay awake. It's like when you're on a road trip, and you just gotta, and if the officer pulls you over, you just say, listen, this is Louisiana. How else am I supposed to stay awake?
Yeah.
Not that I would know.
Yeah. But has he been mistreated, River?
I think he has. Free Jeffrey. This has been fascinating to me as a sort of like PMC anthropologist, which is how I like to describe myself. And I don't think you could really describe my writing as anything other than that. But all of these rich media people, mostly women, are like they were dogpiling on some CNN anchor because he said maybe it was an accident or something, and they were like, it was not an accident. And just people who would how would you know, people who work for completely different media outlets and stuff,
because I was jacking off with him on the other call.
Yeah. And I just find that so fucking hilarious when they just go at each other like this, because I mean the truth is he's an old fucking man. It probably was an accident. He thought he probably turned the camera off or something, and he was just gonna rub one out. But because of dumb id poll thing, they're like, oh well, no, he's just a pervert. He wanted everyone to see his dick, and he is probably a pervert. But I mean,
that's besides the question.
Yeah, no, I mean it's just people. Rich media women. I think Anna Katchan said something about they like to portray themselves as victims, or really they're just being narcissists. And I think that's probably it. They're just he can't resist these titties, and so he was just jacking off. But also this is a crime, and it's no, bitch, he's just 70 years old and doesn't know how a fucking computer works.
Well, I mean, and in fairness, the Zoom user interface and shit is horrendous.
Oh, it is.
I've had awkward moments on Zoom, not getting caught whacking it, but I've certainly done things where I clicked on a Zoom link that was just sent to me as join this meeting at this time, and if I'm 2 minutes early, I pop into some room immediately with my camera running, mic unmuted, which is like full of other random ass people or whatever. And I'm like, this is really awkward. I don't like anything about this. So I can sort of see how it could happen. And to the extent that, like, remember how everyone at the start of the pandemic thought all the like, oh, naked husband walks in behind the wife while she's reading the news kind of stories were sort of whimsical and cute. Mm-hmm. That's not whimsical and cute because the victims are writers, media people, the only true victims in America.
Yeah, who are so traumatized by, like, this old man, like flamed out dick, and they just like can't handle it. Like, there's no. I mean,
well, they're also all the same people who, like, were the ones who were really into like the Gia Talentino like human trafficking thing, which is like way more like problematic than like some old ass man accidentally taking his dick out on camera. Like, like that had no victims. Like, oh, you saw an old man's penis. Like, go to like San Francisco's like Castro Street. There's tons of naked men have their dicks out, and it's just like, okay, well, I don't want to see that either. Are they also affronting us? Like,
yeah, the Giantolotino thing was like one of the best fucking things, because all these people just showed their true colors. They're like, how dare you talk about this person's immigrant story? It's like her parents were slave traders, allegedly.
Yeah. How dare you besmirch the name of these good slave traders?
Yeah.
They provided my nanny. How dare you? She's not a sex or human trafficked victim. Like, what are you talking about? She's great with the children.
Yeah, well, then there was that, and then there's another Atlantic piece about also like a Filipino person who was like my family slave or something like that.
Oh my god!
And all of these like rich Asian PMCs were like, I too owned a slave. Like, it was so bittersweet or whatever. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is insane.
Like, why would you talk about that in the first place? Like, if you are aware of that, like, that's not a thing you you should write about. Like,
yeah. I remember when like it came out with like Beto O'Rourke's wife's like great grandparents like owned a plantation or something, which, like, not surprising, but also like the same people who are like tweeting about how problematic it was were also like solidarity with Gia Tolentino over the abuse that she's receiving for living in a house staffed by slaves
right,
throughout her childhood.
Like, this guy taking his dick out, sure, there like had to be like some kind of like HR thing to handle it, and like, oh, maybe like off from work for a bit, because like that's still a problem, and you probably should investigate it still, like, as a company, like, that's kind of your job. But also, like, everyone like acting like it's the greatest moral crisis, and it's like, no, it's the least like horrible thing about this entire media class. Like, they do far worse things than like accidentally show their dick on like a Zoom call. Like,
they fucking read the news on a Zoom call, and it's just so much worse.
He writes for the
showing your entire ass.
He writes for the New Yorker. That's a moral affront to society.
Yeah. Well, the media class likes to talk about the media class. It's their favorite story to cover. So it's like, oh, if there's not a new war to pitch, we'll just talk about like whose dick we've all seen.
Do we think he was on the shitty media men list before this? I feel like that's sort of the question that's been burning in my mind is, did that brave defense mechanism against the bad men in media, did it work? Did it do its job? And in which case, what was he doing on the Zoom call in the first place? We could have all seen this coming.
Yeah, I mean, like, if an edible Google Doc can't like save society, then what kind of world are we living in?
Exactly. I don't even want a part of that. When our poor journalists who are in some like white fragility training session on Zoom, God, what a fucking depressing year it is. Cannot be safe from technologically inept old man dick. Then what is left to us, really?
Yeah, and it's like these New York media people, like half of them have like they're like, yeah, I went to Iraq and, I saw like the remains of a child being eaten by a dog, but the most traumatic thing I've seen yet is Jeffrey Toobin's dick. Like,
Sick burn. Well, that's not the only thing upsetting the girls this week, though.
By
River,
girls, you mean the gays?
yes. I mean specifically the specifically online gays. River, you put your foot in it.
yeah,
Or-
River started a conversation.
River, discourse starter.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, so I don't know. I made some joke about how like straight white women will touch their boyfriend's buttholes and then say it's a queer relationship, just like a total joke in a shit post. And then it got retweeted by some account,
The jockstrap ceiling.
jockstrap ceiling, which sounds like, first of all, like an NYU student made like a like a short film or something. Like the jockstrap ceiling, and then they send it to like the Pride Film Festival. Just unwatchable shit. But anyway, yeah, the jockstrap ceiling. And so I was like reading the bio, and hold on, let me because I want to get it right. I'm gonna look up the bayou. Bayou.
The
Look up
bayou.
Southern roots coming out.
Yeah, the accent's gonna come out. Hold on. Hopefully he hasn't blocked me. Okay, so the jockstrap ceiling, and keep in mind this is like a fairly small account, like 600 followers or something. So the way that
So
this,
go mob them, fam.
Yeah, go bully him. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, bully them. It says, quote, the jockstrap ceiling is a phenomenon where trans men try to sexually coerce their way into gay men's pants using progressive/woke language. I'm a gay man. And for whatever reason, apparently a lot of my followers are fans of this person. Which again is like a fairly small account. So I figured it would be okay to roast this person because it's such an insane idea to think that this is some sort of large scale problem. Like,
Yeah, I think we can all relate to this, right, fellas? We all know this. No.
yeah, I mean, whomst amongst us hasn't been sexually coerced by a trans man
Using woke language.
using woke language?
Yeah, no, I think we can all relate. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where something very specific happened to this person, and like this very specific thing happened to me specifically one time, and now I'm gonna make an entire Twitter account dedicated to this problem that doesn't exist. Yeah, and I just said something like, well, no trans man has ever sexually coerced his way into my pants for any other reason besides just being hot.
Yeah.
And then that's like all I said. And just a deluge of like comments and quote tweets about how I was a repressed bisexual, which is true. And
Pray the buy away.
yeah, pray it away. Gay by birth. No, I'm sorry. Bi by birth, gay by misogyny. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I was like, well, they were like, just admit that you're bi. I was like, I have? I make jokes about it all the time.
Wait, you're bi?
and yeah,
You're fired.
yeah, I know. How I'm just, yeah, I mean, like, I've made the joke so many times that I was like, yeah, I'm just like a bisexual guy LARPing as a gay man because bisexual men are chameleons. The only people doing bi erasure are bisexuals. Like,
You're postmodern bi in the brain, but you're materially gay.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I saw this kicking off, and I was not helping the case generally, but I've got to say I did not expect the level of venom from the whatever the weird person with their fucking account. But this was like a broader circle of kind of like Twitter's gay men, just the people who are professionally gay on Twitter, just being all like, "You would fuck a vagina. You are the most disgusting." It was venom, and shit. I was catching it like for like my like unhelpful asides in that thread or whatever, and people were like angrily quote tweeting me, and then I feel like this is I was surprised. Were you surprised?
I am like the only victim of biphobia on Twitter, like the only actual one.
Well, I mean,
which is hilarious because I make fun of that for being like a fake thing because it almost always is.
But I mean, so the root of the question here is that when asked the question, is are trans men, and as fellas, is it gay to have sex with a trans man? And I would say unequivocally, yeah, that sounds pretty fucking gay to me.
Yeah.
I assume you'd agree. It turns out there's some people who don't agree.
Yeah.
That you are straight, 100% straight.
My insinuation that they had quote unquote bottom brain did not help. And yeah, I mean, I don't get it. Like, maybe it's just because like most of the trans men that I've interacted with, like just pretty much like unclockable, or you know what I mean? Like they look like men.
Yeah.
And so I perceive them as a man, and I've also had sex with women. It wasn't the same thing. Like, you know what I mean? So it was just kind of like weird for people to just like keep insisting, and like a lot of it just got into like pretty like basic like transphobia shit. It's like they are women, and it's like, no, they're not. Like if you saw them on the street, you wouldn't be like, that's a woman.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and they were like, well, and then apparently some people were saying like there's some whole discussion on like what is it, genital bigotry or some shit, I don't know, like basically like if you are a gay man who is just like disgusted by the sight of a vagina, and like that's why you won't have sex with trans men or whatever, I'm like, as is your right, like that's fine. Like, and I feel like, you know, if somebody's like shaming you or thinking you're like a bigot because of that, then I mean that's stupid, because you have the right to, you know, fuck or not fuck whoever you want. But I mean, I also don't think that, you know, that means that they're women.
Yeah.
Or that like you're not gay if you have sex with them, unless you actually aren't gay like me and you're just pretending to be gay for clout on the internet.
True.
Well, it's
and
also
have a boyfriend or whatever.
Well, it's also not a real issue. Like, trans people are probably more likely to be the victim of like the cis gay person than like, or the straight person or whatever, depending on the relationship, versus like the other way around. Like, the stats just don't lie. It's like making an issue out of nothing. It's like, who are all these like trans men telling you if you don't have sex with them, you're transphobic? Like, I honestly don't see a lot of trans men in the LGBT discussions or spaces or like not aware of it. Anyways, it's like the same way like lesbians are kind of like they're part of the group, but you don't really see them in a lot of the spaces. It's like it's just like a non-issue. Like they're not doing anything. They're just trying to do their own thing. Like,
well, there's not a lot of them, and like most of them don't even date men. So it's like,
yeah,
what do you like? I mean, like in the city where I live, which isn't huge, but like it's a decent size city, maybe like 500,000 people in like, not like in the city limits, but like in the sort of general area, if you count like the suburbs and stuff. Like I know maybe like 2 or 3 like gay trans men, and like that's it. You know what I mean?
And all of them have tried to coerce you into having sex using woke language, right?
I mean, mostly just nudes, but yeah, I mean, like, perfectly fine with me. Yeah, it's just such a non-issue. I don't like. weird, bizarre fixation. But yeah, I mean, I lost like 20 followers over that. I was like, this is insane.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
That's crazy.
And now I've still got people like angry quote tweeting like unrelated things that I posted and stuff. Weird. Insane.
The weirdest part to me, I guess, is I mean, there's maybe a broader cultural point is that this is a little bit reminiscent to me of like if you've ever been around like somebody being like, I'm vegan, and most people go, okay, whatevs. And then there's always one person's like, well, you think you're better than me? Because and I kind of wonder whether it's an instance of the same effect, where simply to essentially exhibit just any kind of difference in worldview, affect, behavior is somehow people just sort of on a hair trigger about the feelings of superiority or something, or like that you're trying to say something about them. Even though it really doesn't involve them. I don't think they were invited to the orgy, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's true. Because like I wasn't even using like woke sort of like and like most of these people have followed me for a while, so they know like I'm not like a woke person. Like, and often
you were using explicitly sexual language, I believe.
Yeah, I was just being horny online. Is that a crime?
If it's on Zoom, yes.
I was like, am I being canceled for being too woke? This is insane. Yeah. For me, anyway.
Well, also like,
yeah.
as like an actual gay man, as a gay man, I think there is the thing of like, oh, if I see a woman, I don't want to have sex with any of them. But there is lots of like trans men. I'm like, oh, they're very attractive, and I could be into that possibly. And it's like, how would that make me bi? Like, I'm not into women like at all. Like boobs, all of that. Like, no, I don't want any of that. And it's like trans men transition. Like they're not women. Like
yeah, and I don't know, the line that they were holding was just so weird to me and didn't seem to like clock well with like, I don't know, if you think about like porn, like most of the porn like involving trans men is consumed by gay men. That's why it's in the gay section of Pornhub. And like most of like the like trans woman porn is like on the straight side of Pornhub and is mostly consumed by like straight men.
It's
and then bisexuals are just consuming everything. So we're the ultimate neoliberal subject.
Two tabs open.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it was just like, what you're saying isn't really clocking well with, what we can observe about, like observe the market. Like, I mean, like the market is good for one thing. And then that, I mean, it gives people what they want. Like they know, like the people who are making porn, like know where the demand is. And they know that the demand for like trans girl porn is not like gay men, it's straight men. Well, that's who they market to.
And I think we should kind of establish that as good materialists who believe that we can observe things about the real world, and then from that we can generalize and abstract. We should observe that there's important prior art here, which is to say that the Pornhub categorization is actually the only sort of universally applicable ontological set of categories available to us. I mean, we should really just things like political spectrums are all fucking phony. We all know the limitations, the political compass, et cetera, et cetera. But Pornhub categories. I mean, like what else do you want? It is complete and perfect.
Exactly, and which is why you can all look forward to our next article on Twink Rev, which Gian and I are writing together. It's a manifesto called Marxism, Leninism, Pornhubism, and you can read all about it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you got anything more to say about what makes you not gay? I feel like
I think I've said enough.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling burnt out. My gay ass is.
So changing topics a little bit, or a lot of bit.
A lot, I hope.
A lot,
I hope. Unless I didn't read the details of the story correctly.
Yeah. So yeah, basically a teacher was executed in France by Moscow-born Chechen who lived in France, who was 18, and basically he had students point him out and executed him by cutting his head off. And apparently some people said he screamed like Allahu Akbar and stuff. So like typical like things, like who knows, like as people have like
Rather
a lot of
selective memories on
conceptions.
this.
Yeah. But he basically showed a picture of Mohammed during a whole section on like political expression, and some people, children told their parents who were Muslim, and people weren't very happy, and this guy decided to execute them, and it all coincides with the Charlie Hebdo trial.
Extremely normal.
Yeah.
This happens every day. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting too that when he showed those cartoons, he did actually say like, "Oh, if you're like Muslim and don't want to see this or whatever, you can leave." But like the girl who told the guy who beheaded him like stayed behind by mistake or something, is what I read, and that's how she wound up seeing them. And then apparently after he did it, he also like shared. At least this was the initial reporting that I read, that he shared the pictures to like the sort of like Islamic State related like Telegram channels or something. So seems like coordinated. But I think that I mean the response to this, or some of the response I saw to this, was just insane. There's like one guy who I think I sort of like quote tweeted him or something on my page, but he said that, well, the guy should have expected a response.
Yeah.
And it's like getting beheaded.
Proportional.
I mean, and then they were just, I was just seeing people who were like, he shouldn't have showed those cartoons, and, they shouldn't have beheaded him, but also he shouldn't have showed those cartoons. And Islamophobia is like a real problem and whatever. And it's like, okay, maybe Islamophobia is like a real problem, but it seems to me that like it is a real problem in places like France, perhaps for a reason. Like, I mean, like people have a right to be concerned about, secularism and freedom of speech in a country where teachers are beheaded for showing cartoons of a quote unquote like blasphemous nature in class.
To be clear, that it's sort of not even a universal position within Islam whether visual depictions of Muhammad are blasphemous or forbidden.
Right.
This is not. It's not. It's like, it's to the extent that it's a particular position taken by some, but that sort of is by the by, because the shitty take, which I always see, is exactly when you're sort of pointing out, it's the, well, he should have expected this, or he knew what he was doing, he knew what he was inviting, which like, holy shit. I mean, what a fucking grim reality that is, where you're essentially granting every premise of like, well, if you insult Muslims in general, you can just expect to be murdered, and that's just a normal thing. Like, I think there might be some uncomfortable stereotyping going on there. If that's your sort of belief that this is just a normal thing for Muslims to do.
Like they can't control themselves, or something. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a very healthy underlying belief, which would say insult Muslims, get beheaded, totally normal.
Yeah.
Like, what is it?
Exactly.
What is it you're trying to tell me there? If that's what you believe is going on here.
Well, it's also like quite a popular viewpoint of like, oh, well, they shouldn't have been racist or Islamophobic, so it's like, I don't care, or they deserved it, on like the alleged socialist left. But I think any like old school like Marxist would disagree with them, because like secularism is a whole point of like Marxism, but also like the ideology that would force someone to like execute a person over a picture is clearly like highly correlated to like Wahhabism and like Salafi jihadism, all kind of the same stuff, like all whatever.
The hard
which is,
right.
which is it's just a hard right, but also like they're not on your side. Like all of these groups are basically anti-communist. Like they would execute you right away.
For
but
communism, you don't even have to show a picture.
But also, it's important to state that he's Chechen. Like obviously, Chechnya is part of the former Soviet Union, and once the Soviet Union started collapsing, conflict emerged, and Wahhabism and like right-wing Islam emerged in the region and led to wars which radicalized people, and we're seeing the aftermath. So it's like it's also an outcome of like imperialism, like the bad side.
Well, imperialism, and also just what happens when people don't have a purpose or like a project. Like people need some sort of meaning in their life, and if if like they have to derive that from an extremist sort of political religious or like interpretation of religion, like that's that's not good. And I also think that the sort of criticisms of the drawings that he showed, which I think were actually like the Charlie Hebdo drawings, was that like, oh well, Charlie Hebdo is like a racist like rag or whatever. And to a certain extent, like that was true. Like I mean, like the pictures that they were showing were like intentionally offensive and provocative, and by all accounts like something of like a right-wing magazine. But I mean, if you are
not by all accounts, not by their accounting at least.
Well, not by their accounting, but I mean, it certainly seemed to be like intentionally like offensive or provocative. Most people would perceive it that way, right? And so, but that isn't a reason to ban it. I mean, if you start like this censorious sort of liberalism that we're starting to see, that started in Europe, perhaps for good reason, after the Second World War or whatever, will be deployed against the left. Like it just will. And we're going to start talking. I mean, like, if you make it illegal to caricature or, criticize a minority group, the rich are also a fucking minority group. Like, you don't think that they'll like catch on with that and they'll do that kind of weird bullshit. I mean, they already kind of did. I remember when the CEO of Starbucks was like pretending to run for president or whatever, and he said that he didn't like it when people called him a rich person. He would prefer to be called a person of means.
Yes. Person of billions.
Right. And I mean, you can already see it. Like, I mean, in Germany, for example, they have laws on, who can and can't, run for office there. And sure, it keeps, the Nazi parties out, but it also keeps the Communist Party from running.
Right.
So, I mean, if you don't think that, like, I mean, like the purpose of those type of laws is to maintain the status quo, and perhaps the status quo is preferable, I mean, it is preferable to like Nazism, but it's certainly not preferable to, socialism. And so people should be very wary of that.
Well, so I mean, I would push back slightly against the narrative around Charlie Hebdo, just because I mean, I think it was a little too easy to kind of put it into, put it this way, the media in reporting upon it in the US, it was the first time most people had ever heard of it, and they would not show anything that they depicted naturally. And then a lot of people sort of made reference to, say, anti-Semitic cartoons. I think the central message of that, or I think it might be better understood as like in the tradition of sort of like that sort of South Park, like we go after everybody. And yes, they might have had a political agenda underneath some of it, but like long live the shit posters.
Right.
And so and to the extent that it sort of taps into a deep kind of appreciation for, put it this way, like there's nothing more French, right, than sitting around and just jerking each other off about how much free speech you have and like how fucking secular you all are. It's just, just what you do. Like get together with your buddies. You're all just like, ha ha ha, let's insult groups. Isn't this the best thing about being us? And like whatever, you can say that's good or bad, but I certainly think, unfortunately, I saw the American kind of liberal left being very quick to sort of start getting to art criticism over something that's just a little more culturally complex, I think, than just straightforwardly being a political magazine of the character of like, it's not like it's fucking The Nation or something.
Right. And I think that it's sort of ironic because the same people who will have these, sort of takes, and it's not just this specific instance, because honestly, like the reaction to that has been less, I think, awful than the reaction to like the Charlie Hebdo stabbings or Ayaan Hirsi Ali, all the things that she's been called or whatever, which by the way, I mean, her politics are not good, but her politics probably wouldn't be so fucking bad if, she hadn't been, pushed to the right by people who just called her like an awful bigot for talking about her own like experiences. But the same people who will say all of those things and sort of, defend, sort of soft Islamism and, in places like Egypt or Turkey, will often, be hysterical about like the sort of Handmaid's Tale, like, Christian theocracy thing, which, I mean, in defense of Margaret Atwood, like was like kind of a real sort of threat or like at least an alarming phenomenon that was growing like in the 80s. And I mean, I grew up, in an evangelical household and, I mean, I wouldn't want my parents to run the country. I mean, like, you know what I mean? I mean, it wouldn't be like The Handmaid's Tale, but it would be a pretty dark place. I would probably be in jail or in like some kind of forced conversion therapy. But I mean,
just to be clear, for your attitudes on trans men, right?
Right, exactly. They're doing bisexual erasure, but no, I mean, I love my parents, but they shouldn't be running the country. But I mean, that is not like a sincere like threat anymore in any like civilizational sort of like scale way. It was different when there was, people like doing like the guy who did the Olympics bombings or whatever, who was like a right-wing Christian theocrat, or when people were bombing abortion clinics or whatever, like it did seem like a real, like there was like a right-wing extremist, like Christian terrorist sort of thing happening then. It's not the case anymore. That has shifted to, political Islam, and it is dangerous. And just because like those people are from a sort of minority group, I mean, of course you don't, target normal people who are just living their everyday lives, and you don't build this sort of like police state, but at the very least, like you call it out for what it is, and you don't try to censor or like take you don't back down an inch from secularism just because the people who are asking, in France more so than the United States, for you to do so are not white.
Yeah.
And that's like a weird, bizarre thing that the left is doing. And a lot of these people are like not, like the guy I was talking about who tweeted that insane thing was like a non-binary Jewish communist or whatever, at least according to his bio. I was like, I mean, like these people are not your fucking friends.
Yeah.
Like,
well, also people miss the fact that like the right wing, like Islamic like terrorism also it works hand in hand with right wing like Western capitalists groups. Like same with imperialism. Like, they help each other. Like, oh, the terrorists are winning, so we have to be even more right wing. It's like, if the left wants to just keep denying that there's an actual issue, and they're like, oh, we just should be mean. It's like, no, because all you're gonna do is see a surge in right wing populism across Europe, which we do see, and we do realize sadly, like once left wing or like center left candidates are willing to take it on much more harshly, like the social Dems who are not like communists or anything in like Denmark, or like in France with like Mélenchon, who's like socialist person, the candidate who actually talked about this attack and was like, we need to deal with like the funding of like extremists, and like he also mentioned like this hurts regular Muslim people in our country because they're going to get blamed. And I feel like if the left doesn't have a tactic that's nuanced, that addresses the issue, but like also doesn't just lead to like outright xenophobia and like right-wing populism, like they're just going to lose. And it's not going to help anyone because like the people who are like working class or like tend to be like the ones who also are most likely to get pushed into extremism because they're so struggling for security and they want to feel like they can change things.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It's true.
I kind of, I always go back to, I guess, the sort of there's a take the people who are say in the American right, who are just like, Islam is evil because it's not Christianity.
Yeah.
and I can't tell brown people apart anyway, so who gives it, like, whatever. So they take them out of the picture for a moment because they are real. They're a very sort of vocal fringe of this country that have sort of always been there and rose to prominence with the neocons, basically. But there's a kind of the neoliberal era has given us a slightly ugly idea that you couldn't even confidently say that there is a place called France that is more than just a geography, or that it's a place that might have cultural norms, that it might have traditions, institutions, shared values, its own history of conflicts over those values that are not shared, et cetera, et cetera. And all you can kind of get is, well, France is bad because in my imagining of like the great sort of McDonald's infested strip mall that is the entire world in my mind palace, because, just all of America, all of the world, to a neoliberal should just be a sort of flat land of fucking Starbucks and Sephora and, and it's just little ticky-tacky boxes or whatever. This is like, and people will just move, labor will just move effortlessly across borders and across geographies in this perfectly homogenous world. And so all they can do is go, wow, in an American political frame, the only one I know and can imagine, the racial politics of this would kind of tell me these things. And therefore, both sides do it or something. Like, just coming up with these most fucking idiotic answers. But unfortunately, underneath it is kind of an ignorance of like, there's a whole kind of French affection for secularism and for free expression in very specific ways that, yes, might have a systemic bias to them. But it's like, that's the history of that country, and that's the history of that, the development that kind of has led it there.
Well, it's
not political change that you're getting at. It's merely just a kind of a sort of timeless sort of presentism mixed with just this like desire to see the entire world just turn into the most boring place on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also an outcome of the European Union. Like, I think we're seeing the massive control by like Germany is kind of imposing their neoliberal like capitalist model of austerity and neoliberalism like onto the rest of Europe, and it's why countries are starting to want to leave. I mean, like Italy's talked about it, France, Britain left, and we're seeing like the places that have the least power in the conflict, either because they have no financial means because everything was gutted by like to join the EU. They got tons of programs which hurts all of the working class and makes them more angry and want a victim like or pick someone who's like responsible, and often it's immigrants. But also immigrants get less money. But we're also seeing countries like in Eastern Europe where it's much harsher than France, and like their populations are leaving too. So like why would they think that sending millions of people to their countries, off many of them are very small, like is gonna be beneficial? Like,
Well, and just, I mean, I think the point about that this has been an issue that's just been sort of ceded to the right is both that you'll get people who are just sort of anxious about change, and you can't even get a full-throated idea that there is such a place as a country anymore. Because yeah, it's just a sort of like EU, everywhere is anywhere else. And so the right wing are the only ones who will say, no, there's a country, it has traditions, we have norms, we have laws, and unfortunately that's a very popular position. There is no left rejoinder to that. It's just neoliberalism all the way as far as the eye can see.
Right. And that's, I mean, it's reasonable for people to want to sort of maintain their culture. I think, like, on both sides, both, like, you know, people in the United States whose families have been here for a long time, and like, or in France or whatever, and like the immigrants who are coming who also want to sort of maintain their culture, at least most of them. Um, but like the truth is that like it's all going to be synthesized, and like I mean, eventually, like every country is going to kind of just look the same. I mean, if you go to just about any other country, you will see, like you said, like a McDonald's, a Sephora, like it's just like the evening of everything. Like we are creating like a global civilization, and it all sucks. And I mean, yeah, I I just feel like it is kind of insane, because if you sort of like, on the one hand, like if you critique you know, for example, as some people in Europe have like the practice of, you know, wearing burqas or whatever, you know, people will accuse you of being like a colonizer. But I mean, in a lot of cases, like it's like, no, like from the point of view of like a French person or whatever, it's like, no, these people chose to move here. Like, you know, this we don't do that here.
yeah.
And like that's an understandable position to have. It doesn't mean like it's like right or whatever. But then people feel the need to defend it, you know, so much to the point where they are like, oh well, no, wearing a burqa is actually like feminism, and it's like, no, it's fucking not, and you know that. You know, no, like you know, a woman like not showing her face in public or like speaking to men, like that's not feminism. You're insane. But like, you know, they have to do this because it provides like a sort of like cover for what they know will eventually happen, which is that, you know, all of society will eventually become the same. Religion will become increasingly less relevant as we all worship the, you know, the great god of the market. And yeah, I mean, it's all just a huge farce, and you know, an academic parlor game, really, this whole multiculturalism thing, in my opinion.
Well, it's also like many of these countries were destabilized because of imperialism, and even there, like these aren't cultural norms. Like Syria, Libya, like Tunisia and stuff. Like when these places have like their conflicts and they leave for Europe, you can't wear a burqa there either, or it's heavily restricted. It's like, oh, so people want to talk about these countries and be like, oh, it's just their culture. It's like, no, most of these countries are moving away. Like if you, like Syria has been restricting it more. Like, I literally remember actually, because I was like a rad lib, whatever, when I was a libertarian for a bit, and I was like, how dare France restrict the burqa? It's like they're right, whatever. And literally, like people from my college who were like from Egypt and Tunisia were like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, no, we hate this shit. Like, we don't want this. Like, why? This is not good. Like, and also like they're or Muslims. Like, no one's forced to wear a burqa in like the fucking Quran. Like, they were a little like so mad. I was like, oh, maybe I am wrong. Like, um, like I think there is things where like it can be problematic within the French culture. Maybe like I think it's fine to wear a cross or like a yarmulke or like a hijab in a school. I think that's fine, whatever. But I think when it comes to like burqas and stuff, like sure, like there's a discussion. There's always a discussion to have around these things. Like at least it's like
yeah, between the horrible, bad, racist people
yeah,
and everyone else.
yeah,
Right. But I mean, like, for example, like I wouldn't ban the hijab or like ban people wearing crosses at the DMV or like whatever
yeah.
in like America, because like that is like Americans would perceive that as an affront to their religion, because American secularism is very different than French secularism. French secularism is much more severe and like came from a different history than ours came from. Like the United States, I mean, I guess you could argue maybe in the colonial area, like the Puritans, you know, or whatever, it was kind of a theocracy, but like the United States as like the republic that exists now, like never was. And you know, the French lived under, you know, the rule of like a king and like the Catholic
Catholics.
Church. And so, you know, those were the institutions of power that had to be destroyed in order for them to build, you know, this bourgeois republic that they have, which was different than, you know, what happened in the United States. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell French people what to do. It's not my fucking country and I don't really care. But like,
No, it's full of fucking French people.
Yeah.
What do we do with this shit?
exactly. No, I mean, like I think you can still smoke in bars there, so they must be doing something right.
Love
I'll
it.
give them that.
Viva la France.
They're also anti-ketchup, so that's pretty cool.
Nuke 'em.
Well, it's not the only thing of like sovereignty we saw after. I think it's been a year since Bolivia had its coup, and then they had their elections recently, and Evo Morales' party MAS just re-won, and it's
Yay.
and the response of the extremely online left has been everything from completely fucking insane to like, yay, this is good. And then I've been really enjoying all the takes which are like, see, America, you can vote fascism out. Biden, Harris, 15 days to vote out the fash.
The fash that we created.
But yeah, and it seems I will declare my personal interest in this as saying like, I think I'm pretty happy to see Bolivia transition back to whatever polite social democracy and general kind of wealth redistributive effort it was doing prior to this nice little coup.
Yeah. I've just found like the response to be really from like liberals to be really strange. Like the ones who were like, you know, adamant, like Yasha Monk and people like that, which his response has been no response, which I think is funny. But people who were just adamant that Morales was a dictator and this is authoritarianism and blah blah blah, and these people are just really showing their true colors, because it's like, no, they won 52% of the vote. Like no, this is clearly like the will of the people. You're not concerned with the will of the people, like you're concerned with the sort of mildly socialist policies of MAS, movement for Indian socialism, I think is what that stands for. But yeah, I mean, it's the liberals will call anything that mildly threatens the corporate interests of the United States as authoritarian, regardless of how the people who live in those countries actually feel.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, you kind of touched on, like, people like Jacobin or a lot of, like, social dem people I know who really bought into, like, the fake narrative of, like, oh, Morales stole it, it was fake, and then, like, basically had to realize this massive, like, right-wing coup where they're, like, burning the rainbow, like, flag, the
indigenous flag.
Yeah. They were, like, saying we're going to return to be a Christian nation and all this like denationalize and like build with like the police and military they literally had a year of like people fighting against like the state to try and like do this. It wasn't just like we just voted and fascism's gone. It's like no, they were struggling for so long, which like none of you paid attention to. But now you're like, oh, don't ignore all our articles saying he's the same as Bolsonaro. He's actually the best person in the Americas ever, which is like what Jacobin did. It's like, no, you can't do both things. Like we're gonna call you out. Like you're
They can always work both sides. That's their one talent. I did think it was interesting. Sort of dunks on Elon Musk, like ha ha ha, ha, you don't get the hands on the lithium mines and the Tesla stock is down. Like I was like, cool. Good on you.
Yeah, how else will the capitalist class be able to get their hands on lithium?
Yeah.
Like
how? Oh my! I'm sure Elon Musk is crying into his. Yeah.
No, I mean I'm glad that people were happy. I was happy about it, but I get very skeptical when people become far too triumphalist. I'm like, this is not like no, like you need to be very vigilant. Like this is like I don't think that they would have gone forth with these elections if they thought this was going to be like the outcome. So I think that people need to be very cautious, because like one of two things I think is probably going to happen, and maybe I'm a cynic, I don't know, but either like Moss is going to be forced away from like the sort of, I mean, radical and not radical and like, you know, as in like this is the Soviet Union or something, but like radical in terms of like, you know, the sort of neoliberal world order that we live in. They're going to be forced away from that, or the same thing's going to happen again, right?
Yeah.
Because you know they are not just going to let them keep nationalizing industries and stuff without something happening. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Maybe they'll, you know, maybe Moss will do better at getting like the police and the military on their side. I don't know, and I don't know what the consequences of that would be, but I just know that the United States has been trying to get rid of you know, the Chavista government since like 2004.
Yeah.
And
right.
like there's like that's not going to change.
Well, so I thought what was interesting about some of the response was a general sense of surprise that Bolivia would have kind of orderly elections that were not really alleged to have corruption and things like that.
Yeah.
I think it was you, Sam, last time pointing out like I feel like it just speaks to a certain kind of ignorance of the country.
Yeah.
Like, brown people, they can't have elections. It must be dictators everywhere.
Yeah, and also like there is already a tide of trying to ruin the results. I mean, the right wing who helped do the ouster last time are already out in the streets calling for the removal and all the same dumb talking points. And there's all the OAS and like U.S. and like Western politicians and like economists and stuff like, oh, well, maybe there was issues. Kind of like they're all trying to redo it again. But I think one way that maybe the left did better is it was just so obvious that it wasn't progress for people, which is why everyone had to switch. I don't think the same can be said for like Venezuela or like I don't know where else, like the Middle East, where like we kind of just feel like the Middle East is like backwards, and like Venezuela just comes across as like we just see like the videos,
They're eating rabbits.
They're eating rabbits and they're eating trash, and it's like all these things which like I've talked to people and that's not the reality on the ground. I mean, there's some of that, but like it's not the full picture. Yeah, it's like they're gonna keep trying, but also like Venezuela and like Cuba are so good if they're military and stuff that they have the infrastructure where like if they're removed they'll just be put back into place, which is why they keep failing. Like I think Bolivia will have to do that or they're gonna collapse and go the way of like Ecuador or like Brazil or something like that.
Chile.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there's like one thing that liberals will always do is be like, well, why do all these left-wing governments in Latin America adopt authoritarian tendencies? It's like because they literally can't survive unless they like co-opt the military and the police. Like, I mean, are you like they're not idiots? Like they know as well as I do, like that's the case. I mean, why was the Soviet Union so authoritarian? It's like, yeah, maybe because you were trying to destroy it. Like that was maybe it's because that was the main foreign policy goal of the United States and all of Western Europe for its entire existence. Like, I mean, the just yeah, I think that it's a very big possibility, and people should be all of these people who claim like we're going to push Joe Biden to the left. I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to do that, you better make sure that when he gets into fucking office, he doesn't try to put sanctions on Bolivia, because like I can guarantee you that that's going to fucking happen. And you know they'll do the same thing they've done to Venezuela. They'll put like massive sanctions on the country, and then when the economy collapses, they'll be like, look, socialism doesn't work. And then use that as some sort of like impetus for removal or whatever. And
Yeah, they also don't know what authoritarianism means. Like Juan Guaido is still running around Venezuela pretending he is the like legal president, and it's like that would not fly in America. He'd be arrested for like espionage or something, or like trying to topple the state.
They would just drone strike him or something.
But also like I think there's another thing is like Latin American left parties do like they're actually left wing in their thoughts, like they're more class focused. I mean, there's like some intersections like like women's rights and like indigenous rights and stuff. Like it was class focused as my friend Eric Arbor wrote like a really good piece on like decolonization for class unity for Bolivia.
Mm-hmm.
But also like I think Latin America is headed towards a shift back because we're seeing, at least under Trump, like they're not doing the soft power that's necessary. So it's kind of reverting back. Like Lula, who was in prison falsely, is free now in Brazil, which means he can run in the next election and he will win. Like Chile is voting this week to remove the 1980s like Pinochet constitution that basically prevents any like human freedoms and like ability to do any social democracy or anything like that.
It's where their constitution written is it's just a picture of Milton Friedman that everyone's required to jerk off onto every single day.
We have
weird?
We have like Peronists and like power back in Argentina and like AMLO in Mexico. It's like I think it could totally reverse unless we reinstitute full-on soft power, which tends to actually really effective in destroying states.
Oh yeah, no, it's weaponized science, and the Democrats are the fucking masters of it.
Yeah,
I mean that's the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean they are the technocratic managers of this, decaying empire.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like I'm not saying you should vote for Donald Trump, and I didn't, just for the record. But like all these people who are like have anti-imperialist in their bio, and then they're like vote for Donald Trump. I'm like, no, like Democrats are way more effective at administering empire than Republicans are at this point. Like Donald Trump doesn't give a shit. Like he doesn't know where Bolivia is. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
I mean, whatever happened the first time, it was probably some Obama appointee that was like, hey, we're going to support this coup. And he was like, oh, okay. And then just ate a cheeseburger or whatever. Like he doesn't.
It is a lot of the Iran-Contra people, that same crew were kicking around for a while, but they mostly sort of cycled out now. So I don't think we're going to see the same. I mean, the best part about that was it was just the same playbook. They only have one, and so I think everyone kind of saw it coming.
Well, it's also like we see because Trump is like breaking records for like dropping bombs and stuff like that across like the Middle East and stuff. So that is a different reality, but like. I think people also don't put into account all of the like suffering and issues created by like full-on regime change for soft power, which is like we see the bombings of like Libya, and that looks horrible, and like in pictures. But what you don't see is like the slave markets, and you don't see like all the people like losing all their social safety nets, and not having clean water, not having housing, and like having to deal with like right-wing militants like massacring them, because like that's not going to be showed in the media. You're just going to see like the bombs in Iraq, but not the millions killed from like sanctions. And it's like, I tell people don't put that into account when they're like addressing like who is the worst. I mean, they're both horrible. Like we don't need to like, yeah.
No, I like the Democratic Party and like liberalism in general is the lube of imperialism. Like it just makes it go in a little bit easier. Like, I mean, Republicans will just like spit on it and push harder or whatever, or just like drone like a Pakistani village, but like indiscriminately. But Democrats are sneaky. Like they're the ones who are doing all the awful shit, but doing it in such a boring, technocratic way that nobody fucking notices. It's like the whole kids in cages thing.
Yeah.
Like if Obama had just like gone up there and started using racial slurs about Mexicans and like, whatever, then I'm sure like people would have noticed what he was doing, but he didn't. He was very, polite. And like, I'm sure everything that was happening was administered in some boring like PDF that was publicly available, but no one read. And yeah, I mean, like that is the one thing you can say about the Republican Party in this era is that they do everything that the Democrats do. They just do it more openly. And like, I'm sorry, but like this whole call, like that's why like the sort of like neocons are so like have attached themselves to the Democratic Party, because they realize that they are much more effective at administering this sort of imperial project and this hawkishness, because they have this professional sort of like boring affect that doesn't get the people going, because they know that like this project isn't popular. And so it's much easier to have people who just don't talk about it than or talk about it in a way that no one can understand, than people like Donald Trump who just go out there and just like scream whatever.
Well, the Lincoln Project will immediately rebrand the day after a Joe Biden sort of victory to like the McKinley Project or something. It'll be just like full blown imperialism.
Yeah.
But as you say, yeah, polite.
Yeah.
Well, although the problem is, and this is where like if I were a lib making the vote Joe Biden case, let me give the pitch and you can see how it is. Here's so part one is
I'm counterpoint.
You don't have to. Yeah, I did not vote for Joseph Biden, for the record. So like you will not have to listen to libs whine for the next 4 years about the orange dangerous Cheeto fascist bad man. That could almost get me off the couch, honestly, because I'm just sick of it. The second part would be Biden is so senile that he would just accidentally like blurt out like, yeah, with my briefing of the friend of with the coup we're running down in Vuvuzela. And so maybe he actually wouldn't be a competent enough administrator of sort of American imperialism. I think.
But then
he's maybe not up to the task.
But then you get Kamala, who, in Caleb Malpin's book on Kamala Harris, points out really well like her connections with like a very Hillary-esque, kind of like that whole group of like war hawks.
Hillary State Department, yeah.
Like Trump only was able to like topple one state, which is good. That's good. He only toppled one.
Folks, it's the best state.
He fucked up a bunch of places, but like he only got to do one, and that was Bolivia, and it already reverted. Like under the Obama administration, it was like Ukraine, Honduras, Libya, Syria, Yemen. They tried for like
Canada.
They tried in like Venezuela, like Brazil, like all these places. And it's like how horrible they all turned out to be. Like, like why would I trust Joe Biden, who's like gonna die, and then have like Kamala Harris have powers like having Hillary in office, and that'd be a nightmare for the world.
Well, like, I mean, like Joe Biden isn't going to be running the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, that's going to be a weekend at Bernie's situation at best. If like Kamala doesn't just like put a throw pillow over his face, you know, in the game,
leaves a choking hazard toy around, and this problem will sort itself out.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like that's not. It's going to be all these like bureaucrats and administrators, these evil like DNC people who are running the show. And I think if we get to that at that point, like there's no pushing. You can't push a system. Like you can't pressure a system of like disparate sort of bureaucrats to like, don't invade Venezuela, please, or whatever. And the whole structure that's been built around this, sort of new Democratic Party on like the elite level, which, like you said, like the Lincoln Project, I mean, it's just a rebrand of like George W. Bush-ism in like 2004. Like what, like, yeah, I mean, if Joe Biden is elected, the Lincoln Project will have like, I don't know, like a fucking benefit Twitch stream where they like get Juan Guaido a nuke or whatever. Get like AOC to play like Donkey Kong with H Bomber guy and
Fausch.
and Fausch, yeah.
Oh god.
They're like, yeah.
Remember, get those super chats going.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's like, hey, you guys, I'm AOC with my favorite YouTubers, Fausch and Fotzlime. Everyone vote for Biden, and also fuck the communists, murder them all. Democracy, freedom.
Elliot Abrams, are you ready to play Mario Party?
Oh god.
Yeah.
Well, that's a depressing thought. Should we leave it there? I wanted to plug a couple things. One is River's most recent Twink Revolution article called "The Prodigal Sons of Capital." It's up on twinkrev.com now. River, you want to give us the stinger?
Yeah, I trace the sort of new left or syncretic left, whatever you want to call it, from the sort of 1960s and campus activism through like the Weather Underground, the Occupy protests, and sort of finish up with the Chaz. And it's all about how, we can't count on these sort of rich kids, like these failed children of the bourgeoisie, to save us, because ultimately they know what their class interests are and they sort of just return to their kind of predestined role to help manage this awful society in which we all inhabit.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece. Highly recommend it. The other one we just published today is one near and dear to my heart, off the back of the victory of girl boss Jacinda Ardern and the New Zealand Labour Party, returned with a stunning majority in the New Zealand elections, no doubt due to CIA interference.
Yeah.
No, I mean, basically because of I think a very competent technocratic management of the pandemic in New Zealand. Hat tip for that. But JJ Harper has written a piece called #GirlBoss, Stardust, and Substance Abuse: New Zealand's Neoliberal State of Mind. And it's a long read, it's a scathing read, and it kind of just deconstructs, I think, a lot of the myths that particularly, say, Americans, but many people just around the world have about sort of New Zealand's sort of supposed progressive credentials. So it's a good read. It's a deep read. It takes you through some of the history of, I think, just the utter lack of ambition of the New Zealand left. They're tweaking marginal tax rates and kind of that's about it. It's that sort of stuff. And there's just been a lot of high profile failures, particularly if they're dealing with like Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand. And yeah, so anyway, it's a good read. It's a very long read. So maybe read River's piece first. You can just do that with like a glass of water, a stiff drink, and then you might need a couple of cups of coffee to get get through the other one. But
I'm gonna need to masturbate on Zoom for that one.
yeah, remember get your dick out. All ours are on the Zoom session. We're just been stroking it the entire time. So
Also,
should we
one more plug. Check out our collab with the Fed Post podcast. It's a 2-parter that came out on Monday, and you can hear the first half on Twink Revolution, like anywhere
wherever you're listening to this.
Yeah, wherever you're listening to this, and on the Fed Post, I think it's on like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff now. So
yeah,
and
really
the
good.
Twitch stream, right?
Yeah. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this, I guess in the morning, tomorrow night, we're going to be live streaming with a friend of the pod, Peter Coffin, and River will be there as well, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So just look out for those details. But basically, it'll be on our Twitch stream, and if you don't subscribe to that, it's twitch.tv/twinkrev, and you'll get notifications and stuff when we go live. But it'll be in the evening our time. All right.
Awesome.
That's it. Well, thank you, River, for being here. And ready, everybody, Zoom ejaculate all at once as we play out the theme song.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
They may be sovereign countries, but you folks at home forget that they all want what we've got, but they don't know it yet. Tra-la-la-la.